Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Scott Anderson. I'm here with the Common App, Reach Higher, and Collegewise teams with a great panel for you. We're going to give people just a few more seconds while they get into the room, and then we will start the webinar with some introductions and conversation. So just give it a few seconds here. Great. The numbers are ticking up, and I think we will go ahead and get started. So everyone, I want to welcome you to the final webinar in our Excellence in College Counseling series. I think have saved the best for last, because today we have with us the true experts on the process of applying to college, who are these students who have just gone through the process of applying to college, and they are joined by their counselors. So as a means of introduction, I first want to introduce Linda Dwyer, who is coming to us from Miami Palmetto High School in Florida. And Linda is representing the college counseling team from Miami Palmetto High School, which were collectively the winners of last year's Excellence in College Counseling Award. We were not able to join in person with them for obvious reasons, but really happy to have Linda here along with two of her students, Alex and Janice. And so welcome to all of you for being here.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And I want to introduce also Jennifer Martin, who is this year's Excellence in College Counseling winner. Jennifer is a school counselor at Salem High School in Indiana, and she's joined by three of her students, Erin, Ella, and Matt, all of whom are on spring break right now. So want to give a special thank you to them for taking time out of their vacation to be here and be part of this conversation. So we're really excited to have everybody. Thanks so much for joining. To folks who are listening in on this webinar, I just want to point out that if you have any questions for the panelists as we go along, feel free to use the Q&A function in Zoom. You're all familiar with where that is by now in the lower menu bar. I'll keep an eye on that and pepper some questions in if we don't get to, or hopefully we'll be able to get to those. But like I said, the true experts are here today. And so I'm going to start out question with some of the students. And what I'd like to hear about, and I think what our attendees want to hear a little bit about is, how did you engage with your counselor during the process of researching colleges, building a college list, applying, all of that? Anyone want to begin with some thoughts, and we can go around to whoever wants to respond. Give me a hand and I'll call in. Yeah, Janice, please.
So I think first things first, it was definitely extensive. I was in my counselor's office almost every day. I had so many questions, obviously my first time ever applying to college. And I never really had anyone who I could kind of look up to and get information from. So my counselor was there through all my questions, any feedback that I needed. It's definitely a long process. And I think just having her there, a guide, an expert, just to all my questions. And I think it was just great having her. So.
Guide. I like that. I like that word. Counselors act very much as guides throughout this process. Thank you for sharing that. Any of the other students want to offer some perspectives on how you engage? Let's go to Indiana and Ella, and then Alex will come back to you in a minute.
Well, also Miss Martin was always there. She personally, she gave me her phone number and also other students. So I texted her so many questions. And she would always answer me less than 10 minutes. And earlier I had a question about this, and she's in Belize and answering me right away. So she's just always answering me as fast as possible, and just always there to answer any questions that I had.
That's great. And questions come up at every turn, right? And when you need someone to turn to, it's so great to hear that Ms. Martin was there to provide that to you. And that constant communication, no matter who your counselor is or who you are as a student, is so important just to gain information on the process as you go through it. Alex, I think you wanted to add something as well.
Sure. So I just want to add a little brief component. It's really, I think, the utility of a counselor is to clear up those little questions that come up when you have, like, your overarching, challenge of applying to college. Because very often when I was working without a counselor, I would run into some roadblock, like, can I really talk about this? Should I phrase this like this? What's the format for this? How do I put it in the Common App like this? And those questions would stop me, and I would cease working for like the rest of the day. So when I'm, in my counselor's office, I can really knock out a lot of work because I just go through the process, and whenever a little hiccup comes up like that, I can just smooth it out, and then it becomes, a much more productive process.
Thanks for sharing. Yeah, that's really important. I think it's the small things along the way that can be the things that sometimes trip students up. Big things as well, but when you're in the thick of the process, having someone to respond to those little questions as they pop up is so incredibly important. Matt, Aaron, I don't want to leave you out. I also don't want to foreclose on your opportunity to, respond if you want. Don't want to call you out rather, but anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I can go ahead and add something. For me, it was mostly just a financial aid sort of deal, just trying to get numbers down and set for college. And Mrs. Martin was extremely helpful in getting the cost aligned and outlined for me. And it really helped me in choosing which college I would go to.
Thanks for sharing that. So important. It's not, the people sometimes say, the process of applying to college is not over until you've also applied for financial aid. And then, of course, it's not just the application, it's getting all of the information back and weighing financial aid offers against one another to see what makes the most sense for every family. So it's really important that you bring that out. Thanks a lot, Matt. Aaron, anything you'd like to add?
Miss Martin, she was there for everything, where it was college applications, financial aid, and then just like scholarships as well. She'd help you like teacher recommendations and just about everything we needed to get the most complete application to give us the best shot. Great.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Let me pivot, Jennifer and Linda, to you. Maybe Jennifer, I'll start with you. Heard a lot from the students about the process of applying to college, but even before that, there's a whole process of figuring out what colleges to apply to, right? And so as you think about how you work with colleges, with students to help them build out a college list that's going to be right for them, Jennifer, what are some of the techniques that you have? How do you work with students on that? How do you help them see what opportunities are?
Well, I start meeting with them individually in the spring of their junior year, and we start talking about what are you thinking about doing, and I always give them a to-do list and some websites and things to check out and see what schools they're thinking about, maybe throw a few more into the mix. And then in the fall of the senior year, I sit down again, we have individual meetings, and they're always, of course, coming back with questions, but I go into English classrooms and do some guidance lessons, and we look at some things there as far as how to, filter down your list. I have some resources I use. Some of them have come from, College Board, Common Apps, and things that they have on their counselor sites. They have a Google Classroom, and I'm always loading things to the senior Google Classroom as far as tips and strategies, scholarship lists, whatever. So try and use a lot of different items. It depends on the student too, as far as what he or she's interested in. If I was, not everybody's going to have the same college feel as far as what they need. So I try and make sure that just because big brother or sister went there doesn't mean that's the right fit necessarily for them. So
that's right. I probably should have started out with this, Jennifer, just so, and Linda, I'll ask you the same thing in a moment, just so people have some context. Can you tell us a bit about your high school? How big is it? How many students do you work with in a senior class?
The Salem High School, we are in southern Indiana. We're rural, low socioeconomic status. We have 550 students, 9 through 12. Our current senior class is about 135. I work with juniors and seniors primarily. We have about, currently it's about 45% go to a 4-year, 45 to 50% to a 4-year college. And then another 20-25% go to 2-year school. Some of them will then transition to 4-year. We have about 10% military, and we have several that will go into apprenticeships or vocational training. They're getting through vocational school right now and will be ready to enter the workforce.
Great. Thanks so much for that. Linda, let me ask you to share a little bit about Miami Palmetto, and then maybe you can talk about the building a college list with students.
Sure, it's interesting listening to Jennifer because our school is a large public high school in Miami, and we have almost 3,000 kids, and we have about 700 kids in our senior class. And it's a traditional public high school. So we have students that are super high achieving and know exactly what they want to do and have known since kindergarten what school they want to go to. And then we have other kids that maybe for a wide assortment of reasons, as general as the population can be, every reason, every life, every background. So we have kids coming in senior year saying, I have no idea if I even want to go to college, and everything in between. So we have so many kids to reach. But we basically do the same thing as Jennifer. We attempt to go into every class, every freshman and sophomore class. For COVID, that certainly was a challenge. And then the juniors and the seniors come in a lot more because, as you know, that's the time to be more hands-on. And some kids, again, we have one college counselor for our school and multiple counselors and a huge support staff. But again, at a school our size, every teacher is your college counselor. Every parent, every person on staff is there to support the kids, and whatever coaches, it's just a big giant team to help get the kids to college or vocational school or straight to work or military or whatever they need to do. There's no one right way to have a happy life, but 60% of our kids do end up going to 4-year schools, 30% go to a 2-year school, and 10% have all the other options. So we're really proud of our kids. They're all awesome.
That's great. Thank you. And that idea of a team being there to support students, not just you, is so important. That makes me so I told the students there were going to be no surprise question, but surprise, I'm going to ask a question that wasn't on the list, but it's not hard, I promise, which is, as you think about, you all talked about how you work with your counselor, which is great to hear, but thinking about this idea of a team being there to support you, is there anyone else that you want to give a shout out to, a teacher, a family member, a community member, a coach, someone who maybe, gave you some assistance or some encouragement and how they helped you thinking about the college process? Anyone? Yeah, Alex.
That's pretty simple. My mom, she's been always in my corner. So, she's been a big support, and she was herself is college educated, but not in America. So she has that kind of ambition about going, pursuing higher education, but she doesn't really necessarily know the ropes. But she definitely has been kind of like the drivetrain behind all of the work that I've been doing, and she's a good help.
Terrific. Yep. Parents and guardians are so important in the process. Anyone else? Any other stories folks want to share? Others who may have lent a hand? Yeah, Janice.
Hi. I think my English teacher from my junior year, she was definitely like very hands-on with just like getting involved and kind of giving me that outlet to know more, do more, and stuff like that. So I really appreciate her. And I think because of her, it definitely got me wanting to talk to my counselor more and wanting to be more hands-on and just communicate so I can get that information.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? I'm not going to force anyone to answer the question. Yeah, Matt, please. Oh, and then Ella.
A special shout out to my current French and English teachers. They were very nice and helpful in giving me advice for college, filling out my Common App, getting things sorted out, and even giving me recommendation letters. Those were very helpful. So thank you to both of them. Yeah, recommendation letters, super important. They can play such an important role in the process, depending on where you're applying to college. And my own wife is a high school Latin teacher, and so I know what that is like on that end. So thanks for sharing that. Ella, you were going to say something, I think.
Also my English teacher as well. Just with scholarships that I had to write for applications or for scholarships, he would always give me his honest opinion on if I should include this information or if I should add something and how to make it different from other applicants. So he always helped me with that.
Thanks. That's great. There's a lot to keep track of, right, in this process. It's not just about filling out one application. So, Erin, anything you want to add?
Just all the teachers at Salem, they were all very helpful. They're willing to write recommendations letters willing to go over essays and see if you've missed something or just had like grammar. They're just all very willing to help and answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you for that. And, just for those of you who are listening in and attending this webinar, the last webinar that we did last week was about how counselors and teachers can work together in support of students. And so I think everything that you're all mentioning right now ties right into that. That video is available, and I hope folks will take a look if they haven't had a chance to do it already. I'm going to stick with the students for a minute. I'd asked counselors how they help students build a thoughtful, a balanced list, right? But I'm going to turn to you now and ask you what advice you have for juniors or even younger students who might just be getting started in the process, thinking about how to research colleges, how to build a college list. What advice do you have for the ones who are following in your footsteps? Anyway, Ella.
Definitely just to think about what's best for you as a person, and how, like, personally, we were talking about how our school is pretty small compared, and I knew that I probably would work a lot better in a smaller college than a larger college with more people. So just like the personal relationships with professors. And so I knew that a smaller college was probably the best way for me, and just not to base it on what your friends or what your older friends have done, because there's always going to be friends who say like, oh, like you should go here with me, but really just think about like what works best for you. And then Miss Martin was obviously really helpful with like, there's a field that, or I'm really interested in physical therapy, so just schools that I knew would really be good for that, just to focus on what's best for you.
That's great. And I'll just chime in. I'll also say, because I know it's Ella, to your point of thinking about what's best for you. Sometimes that's not, it's not necessarily college, or it's maybe it's a 2-year college and not a 4-year college, or maybe it's not an old school. But I think both Mrs. Dwyer and Mrs. Martin talked about, the diversity of students in the school and what those post-secondary opportunities are like. So I'll put that out there. Other folks want to talk about, what advice do you have for the juniors? Yeah, Alex.
I think it's useful to kind of go about the college process, or at least picking the colleges that you're interested in, without doing the actual applications, yet. For me, I found that getting a large pool of potential colleges was super important. I had, for example, like several justifications for why I had college X, Y, and Z. It's because of the affordability, or X, Y, and Z because of the location, or X, Y, and Z because of the prestige and the merit, or something like that. And having that large general pool to whittle down from gives you, I think, the best selection of colleges that are the most right, because you don't want to ever exclude an option that could be right for you just because you overlooked it. You don't want to ever have something fall, by the wayside because of negligence.
That's a really good point. Yeah, starting with a broad range of schools, so you can narrow things down and make those choices based on, as Ella was saying, what's important to you, and as you were saying as well. That's great. Others? Advice? Yeah, Erin.
I started early, probably my sophomore year, just kind of made a list of what was important to me in schools, like location, size, price of it, and then made that rank them in most important to least important, and then looked for colleges that fit those requirements. So I knew the college I was going to met all I needed, so I just had to choose which one worked best for me.
Great advice for anyone who's coming up behind. Janice?
I really agree with what Ella and Alex were saying, just kind of what is best for you, and definitely a large pool, because you don't want to overlook certain schools, because you really never know. I think most of us have maybe been in one place our entire lives, and so we feel comfortable with that. And I know for me, comfortability was definitely a big part of it, but there's so much more. And I think I also kind of did this dynamic where it's a safety schools that I felt comfortable with, that I knew maybe my grades or my GPA, it fit that criterion. So those were the schools that were definitely on my list, first pick. But then I also had reach schools, schools that maybe my grades may not be typical for those, but I have so much more to offer. And Common App, it establishes all that. It's not just your grades, but it's all your extracurriculars and all those things. And then obviously there's that median with schools that you kind of like, you've always thought of, so I think it's definitely important to just have those different dynamics, but just keeping your mind open and things like that. So.
In your mind open. I love it. That is so important. Thank you for sharing that. And Matt, I think you had a few thoughts as well to share.
Yeah, just whenever you're doing the college selection process, make sure that you're diligent and thorough with your searching. You don't want to take any factors for granted or to dismiss them. You want to make sure that you make the best choice based on the total sum of the parts.
Total sum of the parts, everything, right? Everything that goes in, everything that I heard you all talking about. I heard size, I heard location, I heard affordability, like all of those things go into what your own interests are, right? And how it fits with everything. Yes, super important. So I'm gonna pivot on this theme for a little bit and come back to our counselors and say, the students, I think, just did a fantastic job of dispelling a whole lot of misconceptions about how to approach college lists. If I haven't heard of the school, it can't possibly be any good, right? Things like that. I'm wondering, as you work with families and students, what misperceptions do you encounter that you try to push back a little bit against to help students and families really open their thinking to this whole process of applying to college or pursuing post-secondary education in general? Linda, why don't we start with you?
Sure, I'm muting myself because we're all in the same room. There are so many schools, and it depends on where you live and what your experience was. If you've grown up hearing about schools in your area or never at all. I'm originally from Connecticut, so the schools that I grew up knowing as the IT schools now we're in Miami, and people have never even heard of them, which is mind blowing, right? We have a top 10, 20 schools that are popular for many of our kids, but there are just so many other schools. So I know that we use Common App, we use a program called SCORE. Just if you plug in, I want to go in this radius from my house and big football and engineering and basket weaving, and then it'll give you 35 schools to look at. And that really opens up the mind that parents, children can say, I have never heard of that school. And so that's when we tell kids to just start shopping. It doesn't matter. Just throw it on the list. You never know. And if it's drivable, go check it out. And now with COVID was horrible for like almost every reason, except for really the school websites are phenomenal now. So virtual programming is top notch. There are just, you really can get to know a school just from your desktop. So, there's just so many schools out there. So it's fun when kids say, I had no idea, but I'm going to check them out,
Yep. That is great. I was a counselor in a former life. And yeah, that was one of the most exciting parts of the job is when the aha moment with, oh my gosh, here's this school that's out there and I never knew. Jennifer, how about you? What misperceptions have you encountered with students and families, and how do you counter those?
Well, two things. One, the cost. Sometimes they see the sticker price and they won't even apply. And my motto is apply if they've got the program you're interested in, see what you get in the way of scholarship and financial aid, and then if you can't afford it, mark it off your list. And I think some students have been surprised by that when they see those big sticker prices on a private school especially. And the other thing is that I've run into some is, I had this saying that I've used for over 20 years now: college admission is a match to be made, not a prize to be won. And sometimes I don't see it as much with students as I do sometimes with parents. Like, well, my son or daughter got into XYZ college and it's more about the prestige. When really, if that's not a good match for the kid, that's not where he or she needs to be going. So those are two things that I deal with, but the cost is probably the biggest one. The sticker shock that sometimes I just have to say, really, that's not going to be what it's going to work out to. So
yeah, those are big ones. The sticker shock, I see it all the time, and then the trophy hunting aspect, right?
Yes.
That some students and some parents, perhaps more parents than students, will approach this with. Not everybody, and so
not everybody.
Not at all. I'm really good to hear that. And just a quick question. You can give me a show of hands, students, because you all talked about, many of you talked about keeping an open mind and exploring things. How many of you wound up applying to a college that wasn't originally on your list or that you thought you never thought you would have applied to? That's all of you. Great. Wow. Well done, you, and well done to your counselors and everybody on the team is helping you out. That's terrific. I'll stick with Jennifer and Linda, just you really briefly, thinking about the work that counselors in general do supporting students. Do you have advice for other counselors? Oh, I'm sorry, that was the wrong question. I apologize, I got messed up there. Thinking about the how you're helping students think about this. Do you have any favorite resources that you like to point families to, families and students to learn about different aspects of the college or the financial aid process or scholarships?
I go with, College Board, Common App, CapEx, one of my favorites, and then just the college websites. A lot of the college websites have so much information now. It's amazing. You used to have files full of guidebooks and all this stuff. Everything is online. But, and as far as career help, the Occupational Handbook, I love that because not only does it give career information, it will sometimes then link them to what type of degree is needed, and that will jump to the next step of where can I get this degree. So
makes sense.
Yeah. Same with us as well. Common App. We have something called SCORE. Again, as I mentioned, it's like Naviance for people that are in private schools. College Board, there's just so many. And then again, I agree with you, Jennifer, the school websites themselves are really phenomenal. So there's just, I think maybe there are too many ways to get the information and it can be overwhelming. So maybe if a student of mine is into SCORE, then really all the answers can be found through there, or if a parent feels very, very comfortable with Common App or College Board, because that's what they've used for their previous students, then go for it. As long as they read the information, and that's what we're here for, is just to fine tune and answer those questions, because there really is a lot of information out there.
Yeah, that information overload, I think, can be kind of daunting. As students, any of you feel that as you were trying to go through this process, that there was just so much, it's almost like drinking from a fire hose at times? I see a lot of nods, and yes. Agreed. Alex, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think the challenge right now is not even finding out the information. You just have to know how to pose the question almost. There's so much information out there, and honestly, the work of a counselor, I think, is to guide kind of the process and the faculty by which you go about, finding out what's relevant to you. So other than that, there's just so many resources. I really do love SCORE. After I made my giant list, I could just go through SCORE and then rapid fire, find out all the average SAT scores, all the average whatever GPA, all the basic qualifications that would say that, okay, at least I'm within my range here, or this is a little bit out of my league, something like that. You just have to know how to pose the question. Yeah,
that's a really great point. How do you pose the question, and how do you, especially as you're researching colleges and you're trying to get in information that's going to be helpful to you, but sometimes I think students might ask the wrong question to get information that they think will be helpful. Like what's the average size of classes that only tells you, or what's the faculty student ratio that doesn't really tell you much about how big the classes actually are. That's just math, right? And so things like that, I think knowing how to form that question, I think is really, really, really interesting point. I saw a question pop up in the chat. I'm just going to interrupt myself here. Two questions. So Linda, you mentioned that you guys use SCORE, right, in your school. Jennifer, do you use a college counseling platform of any kind there at Salem High School?
We do not use Naviance. I think in the next few years, Indiana will be moving to that because some of the things that are going on. I know schools around us that do it. I'm familiar with Naviance. I use CapEx a lot with kids when they're wanting to look at those things, because CapEx breaks down your percentage of getting in, and schools are a good match, and then also links scholarships. So that is one that I use a lot. I learned about that several years ago at a NACAC conference. So.
Yep. And was it you? I apologize. I can't remember which one of you mentioned because there's a question that popped up about one of you referenced the Occupational Handbook or maybe the Occupational Outlook Handbook.
Yes.
Can you just say a couple more words about that?
I mean, it's exhaustive. I used to, and once again, dating myself, but I can remember every year looking forward to getting the new updated book version. Now it's all online. But it gives you bls.gov/OOH, and basically any career you can think of, it will tell you what's required, what the outlook is. It'll even break it down by region as far as where you live. It will give you similar occupations, which is what I like. I know sometimes students say I want to be a nurse, but they're not for sure. Then you can click on similar occupations and they may come up with something there that they hadn't thought about. What sort of training. They even have career videos. I mean, it's just an amazing site. We start using it with our students in 8th grade and work with them all through. So it's just an amazing website source.
Sure. And I see that Meredith dropped the link in the chat. So Meredith, thank you for doing that. And another Meredith just says, I love the Occupational Outlook Handbook. So there you go. Thanks so much for bringing up that resource. All right, let me pivot back to the students, and I'm going to ask a question, and you have each answered every single question I've asked. So no one is being shy, which is great. But I'm going to specifically say that I'd really like to hear from all of you on this particular question, which is, what do you know now that you wish you had known when you started the process of researching college, learning about college, or even applying? Ella?
Well, this might be an obvious thing, but I didn't know really how much time it takes. I kind of wish that I would have started a little bit earlier and maybe made a list of like the deadline, when this is due, because with sports and with all my schoolwork, sometimes it got kind of overwhelming, and knowing just for like realizing, oh, like this is due in a week. So just managing my time better, I would advise that. And just to know that it does take a lot of time, and don't be scared to just talk to your counselor, or like Miss Martin was always up for, like if I wanted to email her and ask if I could set aside a certain time to ask her a list of questions. So just be open to asking questions and know that it does take a pretty decent amount of time.
Great. And keep track of things, right? That's what I heard, the very first thing that came out of your mouth. Really, really important. Matt, I'm going to turn to you.
All right. Well, what I found out is that a lot of colleges kind of have a template. There are little differences between every application, but for the most part, you can kind of find a pattern, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of know what to expect going in. I was worried that every college I applied to would be super different, and I would have to do so many unique things for the applications. And there were some things that I had to do differently, but for the most part, it was pretty simple and similar across all the colleges I applied to.
So just translating a bit, don't be scared that it's going to be so overwhelming because of all of the differences in all of the colleges applications, because there really is a lot of consistency. That's great. Really appreciate that. Janice, I'll turn to you next.
I think definitely like the tools I needed beforehand. They would always talk about maybe like a senior profile, or your resume, and I had it, but it wasn't up to date. And I think from there, like I wouldn't have it. And then it was kind of like back to the drawing board. I had to like do this all over again and get all this information that I could have previously done if only I knew that I would like how important it was to the whole process. So I think if I would have known that a little bit more, I think just the whole process of it could have been a lot easier and a lot smoother, and saved me some time, frankly, because it was always back. And I was like, oh my God, why didn't I just prepare this before? But going off what Matt said, I think it was definitely similar. So if there's like similar questions and I would be typing, I would be like, oh, I kind of answered this before. And it kind of made it easier, like that template that I could just kind of go in and continue like answering the questions in like the same manner. So
Really good. Yeah, it's great to hear both you and Matt point that out. Erin, what do you wish you had known?
Kind of like how long it took to like do things. Like the applications didn't take as long as I thought they were, but there's just so much to do with them, like college applications, getting the scholarships that are like specific to the schools. They themselves didn't take that much time, but you had to keep up with all the deadlines because you were applying to multiple schools and multiple scholarships. So you just had to keep all your deadlines straight, and so you didn't miss a deadline.
Great. Yep, keeping track of things. That's there's a lot of moving pieces in this process. And Alex, round us out here. What do you wish you had known?
Definitely, I think I could have been cleaner with my form in applying to a lot of colleges, just piggybacking off of what Janice and Matt were talking about. Once you apply to one college, the rest of them become just super easy. Like it's like scales very, very well. Like after you do one, it becomes progressively easier to do the rest of them. You just have to change it up a little bit, answer specific prompts maybe. Also, I think going off of Aaron's point, it does take a lot of time, and it's a very labor and time intensive process. So I wish I could have had a better grasp on what the timeline of applying to colleges actually was. So it'd be nice to have kind of like a general outline of start researching at roughly this point, and then start doing this. I'm sure those exist, but I was a little ignorant to that. And then also just going back to the original point of my original point from a few questions back, you do have to just know how to pose the question. I didn't even know what like ED meant or EA meant. So that was a whole learning process in of itself. So I wish I just had all of that foresight, right when I started, but yeah, definitely took a little bit of maturation.
Applying to college definitely comes with its own vocabulary, and it is not easy to wrap your head around, even for those of us who've been doing this for. So I really appreciate your pointing that out, and I'll just respond to two things you said, just in the way of resource for people who are here on Common App's website. And I know Collegewise has a lot of information as well, although I'm not familiar with how their site is structured. But on the Common App website, we do have some plans out there for 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and what students should be thinking about at any given time. And there's also an application dictionary for the very reason that Alex just pointed out. There's a lot of jargon out there, things that you need to know. Jennifer and Linda, I'm wondering if we can just build on this conversation about how much there is for students to keep and families to keep track of, right? Not just in the application process, but also in the financial aid process. There's a lot. What advice do you have for your students as you're working with them about how to stay on top of things? Linda, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm relatively new to this award-winning staff. Mr. Harry Nirenberg is my predecessor, and he's since retired, but he still helps us a ton.
And he's on the webinar today. So
hi, Mr. Nirenberg. We love him. He's so awesome. So the whole team helps, and like we said, every teacher and every staff member, and certainly the counseling staff, everyone helps. But so as I was learning, I have 2 kids in college, and it took me second kid into college, honestly, to get comfortable with this situation. I think that's part of it too, that everyone on the panel, unless they have an older sibling, it's all new. And as soon as you're a master, you're done. So it changes every year. So I don't know, whatever works for each family, a timeline, a cork, a whiteboard in your kitchen, Post-its, the book. Some parents live and die by whatever the book is for them. Certainly Common App, College Board, Score. Everyone has those timelines. Those, not you. I mean, yours are the best, of course. But those resources do exist. But getting it out and reading it, it's just so overwhelmed. As a parent, it's emotional, and as a student, it's overwhelming. So whatever works for your personality. We do have kids that have Post-its all over their wall like a crazy person, but that's what works for them. So I do love the timelines. I have College Board timelines that I've worked from, starting from freshman year. Do this and do that, but actually doing it is a whole other story. And maybe that doesn't sound professional, but it's true.
No, absolutely right. Jennifer, how about you?
Well, I'm surprised when Linda described the crazy person with the Post-it notes. My students didn't start laughing, because if you've been in my office, my whole computer screen has all these. I am the crazy Post-it note lady, so I use Post-it notes a lot. I encourage students to do what works for them. But senior year, one of the first meetings in the English classrooms when I go in, I said, you need to get a folder that's just your college stuff. And I said, if you want to put a calendar in there, but I said, keep track of things. And I said, and these three students have done a great job with it, but it does get overwhelming, and with the different colleges having different deadlines, and even within the same college, there may be different deadlines for different things depending on a program or a scholarship. And I encourage parents too. I'm like, yeah, you may have had a son or daughter that went to college a couple of years ago, but things are different. I mean, things are changing so fast in this college admissions process, and the speed as far, or the timeliness, it's so much earlier than it used to be even 10 years ago. And I just, even if you think it's something different every year. So it's really important to stay up to date. And I encourage parents that have multiple kids. It may be similar, but it's never going to be the same way with two kids. Even if the kids were identical, it's still not going to be the same. It's going to change from year to year.
I love that, maybe similar, but it'll never be the same. That's a really, really good way to put it. Let's see. So some of the attendees have been throwing some questions in, and I want to turn to them. We've got one who just, I think, wants to know the students a little bit more and just is curious about how do you spend your time when you're not in class? Like what activities are you involved in? What's your big, what's your top one or two things that you do? I'm just gonna go around the screen and start here with Alex.
Sure. So my name is Alex. Again, just want to, throw in an introduction, I guess. But my flagship project outside of school is an internet company called Volunteering Miami. Essentially, we are a catalog of organizations that we solicit, and then they list on the site, and then students can go on the website, punch in their credentials, and then our site packages that information into an application that gets sent to the volunteer recruiter. So we've solicited so far about 800 volunteers, and we've worked with 70 organizations and local governments and things. And other than that, I play guitar.
That's great. Did you have a hand in creating that, or is it something that came before?
Yeah, I'm one of the, I'm one of the co-founders. I have a partner, his name is John. He does the web development, and then I handle all the business stuff. So we're co-founders.
Excellent, very cool. Erin, how about you?
I work at the Washington County YMCA, so I spend a lot of my time there. And then when I'm not at work, I like to read. I read any type of book, just enjoy reading.
Fantastic. Janice?
Extracurriculars outside of school, when I have a community service project, and I paired with, because my mom has been in dentistry for years. So I paired with one of the dentists. They're actually in Orlando, and they supply goodies. And I provide them to low income communities and children in need. And I just kind of like stress the importance of dental health and things like that, because honestly, it's really important to me. And I just, sometimes it's like very overlooked. And so since I kind of have like that information on it, I just wanted to share that. And so I started that last year. And then besides that, I just kind of am a teenager. I do this, I do that. I kind of dangle in all different aspects, and I just kind of keep busy doing things that I like, enjoying, that make me happy. So
that is the most amazing answer. I'm a teenager. I mean, and I want to get to the other students. It's just so important not to overlook that you all just living your lives and doing what you do and doing what makes you happy and you find fulfilling, and that is important no matter what it is. I love the diversity of activities that we're hearing here. Ella, how about you? How do you spend your time when you're not in class?
Outside of school, I really enjoy music, piano and guitar, and then I'm in choir, so I really enjoy that. And then also I'm a part of FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and then also a different like Christian girls group that Miss Martin actually is a sponsor of. So those things are what I really enjoy doing.
Great. And Matt?
I really like working with 3D printers and like printing parts that me and my family try to resell to people, like it, so that they can get it a little cheaper and they can help their engineering projects. And then besides that, I really like movies and trying to analyze like the creative themes and ideas that films can present to us.
Nice. Terrific. Thank you all for sharing. That's great. I love the collection of things that we heard because they are all as different from one another as you are, I expect. So thank you very much for sharing that. So I'm going to do what's called a hard pivot because there's like a really tough question in here. I'm going to pose it to the two counselors here. But we've got someone who's here, a counselor who is trying to get at, we've just gone through this last 2 years of a huge uptick in colleges offering test optional admission. And I think the question is really trying to get at, how do you have those conversations with students about how they should think about utilizing that as an option or not? They're not, I've heard one admission officer say, you know, we sort of exchanged one level of anxiety for another, you know, the first level being, oh my gosh, I've got to take this test. And the second being, oh my gosh, do I need to take this test? So can you talk a little bit about those? Ms. Martin, I'll start with you.
It has been an interesting 2 years, to say the least, let alone with the test optional thing getting bigger by the minute. That's one of those individual discussions I have with a student. I look at what the school's looking at. I look at their GPA. I look at, you know, because the schools are using more of a holistic approach now. And we sort of look at those things that they're going to look for. And how does this school, is it something you need to send? And the other thing is, some of the schools are still weighing them for scholarships. They may not weigh in on the admission process, but they do for scholarships. So it's not, I wish there was a better like blanket answer, but it's really an individual case. Some of our students have really good GPAs, but they don't do well on tests. So those are kids, you know, if you can get in to this school without your test and it's not going to hurt you in a scholarship down the road, then I probably wouldn't send it. But and it's something I think over the next couple of years, we're going to see how it's going to play out some more, because some schools are sort of wavering back and forth.
Yeah.
And some schools, as I said, they're like, we're not going to require it, but if it's on there, we'll look at it. And like Indiana's just this year, they required our juniors, the SAT is their graduation test now. So they have to take the SAT, and the state says we have to put it on the transcript. Well, then when we send a transcript, some colleges are like, well, we won't look at it. And some are like, if it's on the transcript, we're going to see it. So it's a whole mess that we're going to be dealing with over the next few years.
Yeah, really interesting. And Linda, I bet you have a really interesting perspective because of what the public universities in Florida did or didn't do, right?
Right. So I don't think it's fair that you should ask someone else. We have to take them. Our Florida schools require them. I think we're the only state in the country that never stopped that. We've had to have it this whole time. So our kids have to take it. But then the conversation is when they apply to a test optional school, do I send it? Do I not? And I think pre-COVID, no one believed if the school was test optional. And of course, there were schools that were test optional before COVID that really were test optional, but no one believed it. We just all assumed if you don't send it, it's because you have a bad score, right? But we've had a couple admissions cycles where we've seen, no, when they say test optional, they really mean test optional. So it's nice to have that on the books, just so I can say to kids, really, they mean it. They really, really mean it. But now, as we see, MIT just posted that they're going back to it. So, some schools are going to circle back. And then when the SAT goes digital, I mean, it's just going to change again and again and again.
Yeah, it's constantly.
Flexibility is the name of the game, right?
Yes, exactly. It's constantly evolving. I just, students, not without, I don't want to put any of you in an awkward position, but you were sort of thrown into this, you were thrown into a lot of things over the last couple of years, right? But sort of this brave new world of not necessarily needing to take a college admission test was something that was new. Did any of anyone have any thoughts on that without divulging anything you don't want to divulge? And if you don't want to share anything, that's totally fine. But if you have any thoughts, I'm sure people would love to hear.
So you're asking how they feel about the test optional thing, or did they have a situation where they didn't know if they should report or not? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, thank you. That was an excellent moderator translation, and I thank you for stepping in there with some clarity.
We're a team. I got you.
Yeah, Chini's, please.
I'll just be very transparent, because I think a lot of kids are in my position where, like you said, not everyone is a great test taker. And so there's definitely, like when I was talking about that reach school and those safety schools, some of the my score may not have fit those dream schools, but I applied anyway. And luckily, I would say maybe one or two of those dream schools of mine were test optional. And so I didn't send my test. And so It did scare me a little bit just because like we were saying, like you never know if like they're actually seriously test optional or if that's just something they're saying. But I think if you don't feel comfortable sharing your test, like you don't want to send it, you think it'll like hinder your like results or admission or whatever, then I'd say don't send it. But at the end of the day, I was happy that I didn't send it, and I'm happy with the outcome and everything that led up to it. And so I think it's just really up to you and what you feel comfortable with, what you want to do, what your
Very
safety
much.
school dream schools are. So yeah.
Very much an individual choice. That very thoughtful commentary on it. Thank you. And thank you to Ms. Dwyer for helping me get to a point where my question was clear. So thank you. Really appreciate that. I'm looking at the other questions that are coming in. And so we've got a couple that are related to, and you kind of, some of you have alluded to this before, Alex, you in particular, just in terms of how much there's to learn about the process and knowing how to ask the right questions, right? But as you reflect on the application process and also the financial aid process, what do you think was the most lacking in terms of information that you needed to know? Not because you weren't getting it from your counselor, from your school, that's, but what was lacking in terms of what was hard to find or what was hard to wrap your mind around? Anyone have any thoughts on that? Alex?
I think it's always been really difficult to balance being authentic and what colleges are looking for, and you never know what those expectations are in the first place. But I think I kind of got to a place in my college process and journey with my counselor that just encouraged me to be authentic and myself and just talk about what was interesting. So it's a little bit of an unpopular opinion, but I actually loved writing my, Common App essay because, I just got to talk about, how I grew up and about my personal history. So that was, I wish I had, there was a little bit more transparency in the whole process about what the success conditions are for in terms with within that kind of room of college deans or admissions officers, and I wish it was a little more transparent, but I'm glad that we landed on that kind of answer.
So transparency, that was lacking. Yeah, there is a black box aspect to a lot of college admission at many places, and so it's really interesting to hear that. Anyone else have any thoughts on things that you thought were lacking? Yeah, Matt.
Sometimes the after processes with the financial aid, like scholarships and loans and grants, they can lack some detail. I remember trying to choose between my last two colleges. I had a lot of information to sort through with financial aid, and they weren't always very explicit about how things applied. Were they renewable? Did the cost go to this or this? So it was the process of trying to get all the details sorted out so that I could understand where my financial situation lied. That really helped me to decide which school I was going to. And I kind of wish there would be a little more oomph to it,
Yep. Sort of how you tie everything up at the back end, right? Particularly with respect to finances. Yeah, that's really, really important. And anyone else want to share anything? All right. Well, we are coming up on time, and I have one last question that I want to ask each of you. And it's somewhat selfish because I work for an organization that represents almost 1,000 colleges and universities, and we deal with them on a daily basis. And I know that they are always very interested in hearing how they are perceived and what they do are perceived. So my question is, for all of you, what do you wish admission officers knew about what it's like to apply to college? Right? So I'll give you a second to reflect on that. And this is your chance to tell them what you think. And I will start with, I'll start with Miss Martin.
Okay, so what I wish admission officers knew. One thing that is a frustration sometimes, and I've shared this with different admission officers, is when a student applies, there's an automatic email that goes to the student, your school has not sent your transcript yet. And a lot of times I don't even know yet, because maybe the student hasn't gone through parchment and done that. And then the student and or the parent will see the email that the transcript hasn't been sent. And if they could put a delay on that, maybe 5 days or something before that went out, that would make my life much easier and cause less anxiety in the students and the parents, because and I understand it's an automatic for a lot of schools, but I wish that they could change that up. That would help.
That is a common theme, isn't it, that we hear from the counseling community. Thank you for sharing that. Ms. Dwyer, how about you?
Oh, wow. My goodness. It's funny, some of the college reps were students themselves a minute ago. They're all very young, you know. I think they know, but what I just would like to remind them is how incredibly stressed our kids are, and how they're burning the candle at both ends. They're so tired all the time, and they're taking all these incredible classes and working and supporting their family and applying and doing all these things. And so writing an essay that tells them about how they're unique compared to every other kid in the globe. And I know college reps get it. I know they get it. They're wonderful humans, but it's so much to ask of these kids to unburden their soul or whatever. So I know that they get it, but that's what I just want to remind them, is that every single kid in this webinar and every single kid on the globe is a complete person and just trying their best. And this is just a lot. It's a huge process. And so I just have compassion for each one of these beautiful babies, because they're trying so hard. They're just trying so hard, you know.
That's really helpful. Always a helpful reminder. Thank you for sharing that. All right, students, you all are going to get the last word on this. And I'm going to, let's see, I'll start with Erin.
I just wish they would realize how, like what Mr. Dwyer said, just how like stressful it is, because I'm trying to make myself stand out, but not seem like I'm not like seem like I'm full of myself or anything like that. Just want to make sure I stand out and not seem like everybody else, but just trying to find the right way to do that with like bragging on what you do, but not going overboard with it all.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Janice.
I think what I want to remind them is that there's so much more to me. And I think there's so much more that has happened, or there's so much more that like makes me up than just like an essay or like a 700-word essay or like whatever questions they ask. And there's a lot of questions, and it's super dynamic. And I think for the most part, we're able to really express ourselves or describe ourselves. But I just want to remind them that, yeah, there's just so much more to each of us. So, like, there's so many things that we go through, or and maybe we just can't put it into writing, or maybe like not all of us are great writers and we can't make this elaborate and beautiful essay that talks about all our challenges and accomplishments, but we have them and we go through them, and just want to remind them of that. So.
Great. Love it. Love it. Matt?
Kind of like what Janice was saying, I want these people to know that your college application isn't necessarily a reflection of you. A lot of people struggle with that process and will do anything to get it done. And maybe the product that they submit is not completely accurate to who they are. So it's important to know that there's more to people than what their college application may suggest.
Great. Thank you so much. Ella?
I completely agree with Janice and Matt. Just when like writing essays, and sometimes I'd catch myself not really showing who I am as a person, when I know they really do want to know who we are as a person, but sometimes I find myself like sounding more too, I guess you could say like scholarly, I don't know how you would say that, but not really reflecting who I am as a person. So just like they said, just to remember that there is a lot more to each student than the way that they write an essay or exactly what is on the application.
I'm sensing a theme here. Thank you. That's really helpful. Alice, you get the last word on this.
I don't know if I'm being a prima donna, but I think the wait time is a little excruciating. I mean, I think any effort to improve, the latency between application and then, the result is always welcomed for me. It's always, I think I personally love to make an informed decision, and I can't really do that unless I know all the results and, everything that's going on. And so it's any effort to reduce that. I know those are a little bit of, they're kind of grandfathered in there when colleges release, what deadlines they have, but That's always nice. Also, sometimes I would get a decision randomly and like I would open it at a Starbucks and that was like super awkward. So, I wish I had a better grip on when I would be expecting things, just a little less, you can set criteria and deadlines just a little bit more, I guess. Precise. And,
Yeah. That
exactly.
is great information to share. And I know I have colleagues on the other end who are taking notes, and we're going to share all of this. We are just 1 minute past, and I'm going to do one last thing. Well, two things. I'm going to thank you all very, very much for joining us, for sharing your thoughts and your perspectives. I'm going to ask one last question, which I wanted to touch base with you on before this started, but I know it's early still. I know the school year has not ended, and there is still a lot of water to flow under the bridge for many, many students. But have any of you finalized plans for next year yet that you would like folks to know about? Because we get a couple of questions about that, and I just want to be respectful of you first and foremost. And if the answer is no, that is fine. I'm not seeing anyone jump up, and so we are going to leave it there, and that is totally cool. But I wanted to give you the opportunity just in case. Alex, Erin, Janice, Ella, Matt, Ms. Dwyer, Ms. Martin, our Excellence in College Counseling Award winners from this year and last. Thank you so much for your time, for taking time out of your breaks and your school days. We really appreciate it. I know the audience is extremely grateful, as are we. So thank you, and good luck with the rest of the school year and the rest of the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.